so everyone follow Gordon, the guy with the great hat, and I'll have my great hat on in a minute too.
You know, tourists, I see every day, I see tourists come and read the sign there and look very confused. And I wish they had a clearer sign explaining exactly what the problem is. And
that would be good.
A more detailed sign.
Everybody wants to ride it. If you want to see it running, come here on YouTube, right? Well, look on YouTube. You'll see me riding it and narrating. But John Wellborn, who was president of the Angels Flight Foundation and ran it for many, many, many years, still is the guy who knows how to run it, and to make sure that it runs and to keep it going, he comes down every Wednesday around noontime, and it goes up and down the hills. You can't ride it, but you can see it moving, and that's a great thing.
That's just to keep things lubricated?
Yeah, just to make sure that it does run and everything's all right with it. Can you all hear me? All right. Do I need the microphone? I need that for the. Yeah. Looks like the cars are open to development. Okay. Let's talk about the fact that the cars are open. They were always open to the element. When they got it started again, and after it was reinstalled and it came back in the 90s. You'll go up there and get on the cars. You'll notice that there are all kinds of safety things that weren't on the original cars. If you watch old movies that were shot on Angels Flight, you'll see people running right off the cars. You can't do that now because there are gates that close and so on that they had to install for safety reasons nowadays. But it is open. They were always open that way. That's one of the problems now with Angels Flight sitting here currently at night. People climb up there and sleep, do drugs, use it as a restroom, do graffiti, trash, everything. It's very accessible, unfortunately, and it suffered because of that. They want the PUC, who is the Public Utility Commission that oversees a bunch of stuff in California, and as you know, there is legislation now to take away some of the regulatory oversight that the PUC has, because it regulates everything, and they can't really do all of that. But at any rate, they regulate railroads and that sort of thing, and the Angels Flight. And the inspector after they got it fixed and running after its most recent problem, said you can't start that again until you build a stairway, an exit emergency stairway next to the track so that people can get off of it at stops and walk out. That's a way for people who want to go up there and sleep in it and do whatever I've described. It just makes it easier for them to get in there. So I think before it starts again, somebody's going to have to build that stairway. And how we're going to keep other people out of it when it's not running, I don't know. But that is a problem. Yeah, well, it'll change.
Gordon, tell us about riding this as a child.
Huh?
What was its importance to you as a child?
Well, I've often said that Angels Flight now is kind of a nostalgic anachronism in the 21st century. It was built in 1901. It was built to fill a need because many people, including me, lived up on Bunker Hill. And in the early days, before it was built, the only way you could get up there was either to walk up there, or ride a horse, or ride in the carriage up there. And the city was down here. It was just as commercial and busy in those days, and so they needed.
Talia was over there.
Yeah, it was. They needed some way to get up there easily.
So they all residential up here?
It was all residential. There was a little commercial area at 3rd and Grand, which we'll walk up there. We'll talk about that. And there were a few little corner stores and things like that, but it was all residential up there, largely residential.
It was a residential neighborhood.
It was a residential neighborhood. That was it was. Some people have said it was the original first LA suburb. It was built in the developed in the 1870s, and was called Bunker Hill because it was built and developed at the centennial of the American Revolution. So they needed a name, and so they called it Bunker Hill, after Bunker Hill in Boston. Somebody mentioned that it wasn't originally here. That's true. It was at the corner of 3rd and Hill, over here next to the 3rd Street Tunnel. And that was the source of what I have described as the greatest, it was the greatest thrill ride for a kid in Los Angeles. Because the track ran next to the tunnel. And if you have ever seen the tunnel in its old days, you'll know that there's a cutout that goes back several hundred feet before you actually enter the tunnel. Well, the track came right down next to that cutout. And if you were on the car that was on the north side of it, when it came down, well, the other reason it was a thrill ride is that the cars look like they're going to hit head on. It's like they're coming right at each other. In the last minute, they lurch past each other. Well, if you were in the north car coming downhill, that pass, you can see the cars missed by just inches. That pass happened at the depth of the cutout for the 3rd Street Tunnel, and it felt like, and it looked like you were going to get launched out over the precipice.
What was the fare when you were a kid?
A nickel. You had all that adventure for a nickel. And it was a nickel right up until they took it out in 1969. The original fare in 1901 was a penny. But it was a nickel all the way. I don't know when it turned to became a nickel, but it was a nickel through, I think, the 30s. I know it was during the Depression it was a nickel, and it was still a nickel up to 1969 when they took it out. And I have a ticket book because you could buy 25 rides for $1 if you bought the ticket book. So it was 4 cents in 1969.
How much of what we're seeing here is original? Any of it?
Well, the cars are pretty much original. They sat in storage after it was removed in 1969 for several decades, although they said it was going to come back in 2 years, and that never happened. So it sat in storage in Long Beach, I think, for several decades, and they really suffered. All of this, the station house up at the end, all that was put into storage, and it really suffered in storage. So when they put it back, they had to refurbish it. So yeah, it's original. It's been refurbished, but yeah, it's original.
Ties, the railing, and
No,
that's all.
no, I don't. I think all the ties and I don't know about the railing. That
I
might
think
be.
the arches are, I think they saved those.
Yeah, I think these arches are the same. The ties, I don't know about the rails,
I doubt it.
but the ties I think are not original.
Yeah, and I can tell you the rails are new.
Yeah.
All they saved was the stations and the cars.
Put the PA on.
Okay.
I can't hear you. I know
right.
that I was putting
Richard, I
stuff
don't
away.
think this I made those.
Okay.
We can put
You
it
have
okay.
somewhere?
No, I don't have somewhere to keep it.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, hold on. We're going to turn this on.
All right.
And I'll carry this. Thank you.
Okay, so Gordon, everyone thank you for letting me put all that stuff away. It was sort of, we need the table for people to know where we are, but it takes 5 minutes to put the table away. All right, so Gordon, I think we need to keep moving. Do you have any closing thoughts on Angel's Flight? I know you've been talking for some time.
Well, I started to say it was not the nostalgic anachronism it is now. It was the means by which people got down to shop and to work downtown and to go back home. It was a major piece of public transit in those days. It was a commuter line.
How much higher was Bunker Hill at that time? I know they shaved off a bunch.
They shaved off a lot of the top of Bunker Hill. If you see old photographs of Bunker Hill before it was redeveloped, especially if you look at photographs of the 3rd Street Tunnel, you'll see how much higher that was. It was as high as that. To put Angel's Flight back in, they had to build a platform up there. That upper station house is built on a platform because they chopped it off. But if you look at those old photographs of the 3rd Street Tunnel with the Angel's Flight there, you'll see how far it went up. And if there are photographs that were taken after they cut the hill off, they cut it off to the level of the top of the tunnel. So they took away 50 feet. But the other thing about Bunker Hill is it was not one level place on top. It undulated, and there were places that were higher than others. So when they say how much did they take off, it depended on what part of Bunker Hill you're talking about. But it was at least 30, 40, 50 feet or more of the height of Bunker Hill.
Was there only like one stop, or?
Yeah, there's only one stop.
Okay.
You can't get out. Well, you shouldn't try to get out while it's still
You
running.
maybe had like a stop, and then if you want to go higher, you can
Well, I could say that when they originally built it, there was a street called Clay Street that ran north and south between Olive and Hill down here, about midway, about where the cars cross. Okay. When it was originally built, the cars actually went at the same grade over Clay Street, and that was really inconvenient, I guess, because everybody had to stop and let the car go by and everything.
Yeah.
And then after about 10 years, they elevated the track over Clay Street. So the pylons that you see here and everything, that was originally there. It raised it over Clay Street, and that's part of the thrill, because that pass happened not only at the depth of the cutout for the tunnel, but up off the street by about 20 feet, and there were people below and cars and things like that.
Gordon, did you ever drop anything on the public below?
Did I ever drop anything in public below? I don't think I did that. I don't think so.
Gordon, let's, because we're going back in time and traveling, we have to try and imagine what this lost neighborhood of Bunker Hill was. Clay Street is really important because we're going to be talking about the Northern Hotel later, and the Northern Hotel was at Olive and Clay. So Clay Street, if you can, so first of all, we're not even where Angel's Flight was. Right, Gordon?
That's right.
This was Angel's Flight. We're going to walk over to this corner because we have to talk about the newsstand. But when we get back to 3rd and Hill, will orient us where Angel's Flight really was. But what I want to do while we're here is imagine Clay is, if you can imagine the street that runs under Angel's Flight, it dead ends at Olive, where we'll be later, and that's where the Hotel Northern sits. And we're going to talk about Bunny Burns, right, Kim? Bunny Burns and the Northern. So these lost streets are difficult to imagine, but important to understand. So why don't we, Gordon, do you want to lead the way, and we'll find some shade down at the corner, because I want to talk about the newsstand that was on 3rd between Hill and Broadway. Okay. And then we'll get us oriented to the original Angel's Flight, and we'll take it from there.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, okay, everyone can hear me? Good. Gordon, I'm going to pull my notes out, which I have to read from the donor this for memories. Do you want to tell us about Angel's Flight, the original location?
I mentioned that this was the original location of Angel's Flight. It ran right from there, that was the terminus, straight up the hill. This was a very busy corner, just as busy with cars as you see right now, but this was a very busy pedestrian corner because people came down off the hill, got off the Angel's Flight and went downtown to the Grand Central Market, to all of the department stores that used to be down here, the Broadway, the Bullock's, May Company, Robinson's. Everybody came down here to shop. Many other shops that were down here, and down to the movie palaces that were down on Broadway to go to the movies. Somebody asked me, what era was I here? I lived here, and my parents brought me back out. I was born during the war, brought me back after the war, because my father grew up there, and we had property up there. So I lived up there in the 1940s and 50s, and even into the 60s, although our residence wasn't up there in those days. We still own the property and all, and my father and I came down here to do maintenance work on them all the time. Most of the buildings had become rental units, and the buildings that we had were rental units. So we went down there to do maintenance. So I was here during all of those times and rode the Angel's Flight all the time.
Perfect. Excellent. Okay, good. Okay, so one of the things we're going to talk about today are newsstands. Gordon, at the end of the tour, you're going to talk about 3rd and Grand, and there is a famous newsstand there. I just want to, I found an article from 1931 about a man that ran a newsstand here at the southwest intersection of 3rd and Hill, and I just really like this. For 17 years, Mrs. Mattie Barclay was not only the wife but the eyes of Tom Barkley, 80 years of age and blind, who began selling the Los Angeles Times at the southwest intersection of 3rd and Hill shortly after he suddenly lost his sight on Thanksgiving Day, 1914. And now, Mrs. Barkley, at the age of 76, is dead. In fact, she was buried several days ago in Hollywood Cemetery, and Barkley remained alone in the room they'd occupied for 15 years at the Astoria Hotel, 248 South Olive, up the hill. He remained alone in that room until yesterday. He finally returned to his newspaper stand, but not before some old customers, having missed him in the interim, having phoned the newspaper offices and asked if he'd met with an accident. The blind news dealer gently explained the cause of his absence to a reporter. "I was really without my eyes for the first time in my life," he commented with a heroically reminiscent smile. "You see, she took me to work every day and took me back home every day since I lost my sight. But she was all I've had in every way. We never were blessed with any children, although we were married 58 years. We had our wedding on November 5th, 1873 in Paducah, Kentucky. It was hard to come back to work, to go to it alone, now that she's gone. She was Maddie Miles Purcell, organist in the First Baptist Church in Paducah, Kentucky, and only just a slip of a girl, and I was a harum-scarum conductor on the Nashville, Chattanooga, and St. Louis Railroad when I courted her. She seemed pretty well of late, but she had a little asthma. Well, the other morning when she died so unexpectedly, she held on to my arm tight for a whole minute, and I guess she couldn't get her breath, and then she relaxed, and my being blind, I just hadn't realized what had happened. The Barkleys came to Los Angeles in 1910 from Tullahoma, Tennessee, where Barkley was a justice of the peace. He lost his sight 4 years later after coming here, and for many years, Mrs. Barkley taught piano and organ to private pupils."
I know, that's a terrible story.
I know, that's really sad. So downtown was filled with all of these newsstands. There are famous so Hill Street. So I've counted over the last 4 months, I've found articles on 6 newsstands on Hill Street between 1930 and 1970. There was one at 4 on Olive, 4 on Hill, 2 on Olive. There was a very famous one across from Pershing Square called, was it Book Alley? Yeah, Book Alley. Yeah, so they're just, it's a really...
You know why? We had 2 big daily papers.
Yeah.
And how did you get your news?
Yeah.
You read the paper. And you got your news in the morning because you bought the morning edition. You got the news in the afternoon on the way home because you bought the afternoon edition.
Right, yep, yes. Selling newspapers in 1915 is pre-radio, yeah. So just, we're going to walk up, I want to walk up to the Kawada, that brick. Kawada, thank you, the Kawada. But before we leave, I just want to orient us to this corner. We're at 3rd and Hill, talked about Angel's Flight, the tunnel.
Should we talk about Bunny here? If she's in transit, really. Or do you want
But she's taken to the Astor, which is the Kawada. So Kawada. Okay. I think we should go there. The Kawada. I don't know why I keep saying that. Parking lot in back of us. In front of me and back of you. That used to be parking lot. Big building. Yeah, this giant 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5-story building. This used to be the F.P. Fay building for John Fante fans. This is the opening scene of the novel Dreams from Bunker Hill. He works in the cafe, the Marcus Cafe, as a busboy, and he works for the literary agent at night reading scripts. And Ira Yellen, in 1987, worked out a deal with the Community Redevelopment Agency of Los Angeles and what would become the Metropolitan Transit Authority, that if he tore down the Fay building and put up a 6-story parking lot, he would be able to close a big financing gap, and they would provide about $10 million in financing over as part of a $20 million financing package. So, because it's parking for transit, because there's a metro stop right here. So the F.P. Fay building went away. The Ferguson building was the building this footprint we were sitting on, and across the street in the basement was Clifford Clinton's cafeteria. And Kim, do you want to talk about the cafeteria? You don't want? Okay, I'll talk about the cafeteria. So in the basement of the building across the street, Clifford Clinton in 1936 to 1938 opened a 5-cent cafeteria, and it was just 5 cents, and there was no choice. They had soup and bread, and they had a. It was a one-pot meal. They had this soup with protein in it, and a vegetable and a roll. And you gave them a nickel, and that's what you got. And he had to get special permission from the health department to open it. And I'm sorry, it was 34 to 36 because the success of Cavateria was so. He generated it was so successful, he fed so many people, and he generated so much goodwill that J.E. Carr, Joseph Carr, who owned the building that the current Clifton's Brookdale is in, came to him at the beginning of 1935 and said, the Bose brothers want to get out of their lease. I have this giant cafeteria I leased to the Bose brothers at 7th and Broadway. I want you to take it over. I'll give you a great deal. What do you want? What works for you? You're really good at this. I'm so impressed that you're running this nickel cafeteria. Your other cafeteria at 6th and Olive is really great. What do you want? And Clifford Clinton said, this is what I need. And Carr said, great, go. And so Brookdale became this huge project to reinvent this very plain cafeteria into what, well, Andrew Myron's changed it a lot, but he has. I mean, it's a giant redwood. Anyway, Clifford Clinton took over the lease of the Bose Brothers cafeteria in 35 and opened Brookdale, and that's the Clifton's cafeteria that's open now that everyone sees. And
Richard mentioned that the Ferguson building was here. I want to mention what was on that opposite corner over there, the northwest corner. If you look at the old photographs that shot this way, there was a alcohol-free restaurant in there.
Yeah,
Women's Temperance Union.
vegetarian.
Yeah, vegetarian. And guess what went in there in later days?
Liquor store.
Liquor store.
yeah. All right, good. Why don't we, Gordon? Why don't you lead the way and let's go up to 2nd? And I think we'll get shade on this side of the street. So why don't you sort of look for shade as you go, and I'll bring up the middle, and Kim will bring up the rear. Okay, Carl. So
I walked through there last night.
that's good. I like the 3rd Street tunnel more to walk through. Yeah, just in the future. Yeah. Did you park? Yeah, that's a good place to park. Yeah, that's a good place to park. Okay. Gordon, will you hold the microphone for a second?
I don't want to steal Richard's thunder, but I know when they're doing it.
I know when they built it too. I have notes on like minor changes to it. When did they build it, Gordon? Steal my thunder.
1924.
Yeah.
Bunker Hill was considered to be, always considered to be, an obstacle to the development of the city going west. So they dug 3rd Street Tunnel first, and they put anchors right in, and they dug this in 1924. Huh? Early 1900s, like 1900 something. Yeah, I forget exactly.
I think the 3rd Street Tunnel was 1905, and they widened it. So the 2nd Street Tunnel is actually, this tunnel is 24. So 2nd Street is 60 feet wide before the tunnel goes in. And then they put the tunnel in and they widen it. So all of the hotels on 2nd Street lost their porches because they all had property that just got taken out because of the tunnel. Gordon, do you want to talk about 2nd Street for a bit, and then I will. I don't know. We don't have anything scripted, but just
I'll just say that if you go into the LA Public Library photo archives, you go online, you can look at and search for 2nd Street, and you'll see a photograph that was taken at the dedication of the tunnel in 1924. And you'll realize what a big civic event it was, because the mayor was there, there were bands playing, there were all kinds of things going on here. It was a big deal. And I'll just tell you, on the side of the hotel up there was an advertisement for Carnation carnation dairy, under which it says "Eat more mush," because they were selling. It was advertising carnation mush, and there were guys standing on the edge of buildings looking over at what was going on down here. There's no railing or anything. They're just standing there, a couple hundred feet above the water. You probably know that downtown is a very richly used venue for movies, TV, and advertising. There's a advertisement for a car, I forget which company it is, where they're coming out of the 2nd Street tunnel, and I think it's maybe Toyota, but anyway, they're coming out of this tunnel. You can see that Kawada Hotel. There are car commercials in particular that are shot all over this part of downtown.
One could write a book about time at the gym, noticing television commercials as you're working out at the gym and recognizing downtown. Gordon, after we're done with this intersection, we have a lot of heavy lifting to do at this intersection, we're going to walk up the hill and we're going to actually be at the end of Clay Street, that street you were mentioning. Yeah, so good. All right, so this patch of dirt, does everyone see this patch of dirt across the street? This patch of dirt has never been developed. In other words, when Bunker Hill was developed in the 1880s, they built 4 hotels at the top of this ridge that you see, and it's never been touched. They dug out this corner. This corner used to slope down a bit, and it was in 1935, this corner that has the parking lot, all the dirt, 40,000 cubic yards of dirt were removed because they wanted to build a building, and they never did. And this has been a parking lot since 1935. So it sort of appeals to me that this mound of dirt has been basically untouched since 1924, despite all the development downtown. I kind of like that. Of course, the skyline. Of course, when we get up there, what you would have seen before Bunker Hill was redeveloped in the 60s was a gentle slope on 2nd Street that ended about 60 feet higher than it does. So when we start to walk up 2nd Street and we look at Disney Hall, really before they tore everything on the hill down, you would have had this much gentler slope, a grade going up another 60 feet, right? Go to the steepest hills. And you probably had 5 or 6 houses and hotels on top of that hill that they just totally scraped away. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it probably is obvious why they named it Hill Street, because there's a hill, right? But more than that, Hill Street used to go through a tunnel.
Oh, that's
right
next
down there.
month. Don't talk about that yet.
Anyway,
too
it
much.
did.
That's next month.
Lost
Tunnel.
You'll find
next
out
month
all
is
about
Lost
it.
Tunnel.
There was a tunnel. That's the Hill Street went through.
I mean, there was a time. We gotta save this stuff, All right, so we have a lot to talk about. Kim, are you ready?
There's a lot to say about that.
There's a lot to say. I know, and I promised Nathan we'd wait for him to come back. Okay, so don't be upset. Kim, come on. Okay, Tim, you're gonna watch and make sure that doesn't zoom automatically. All right, I want everyone to turn around and look at the Kawada Hotel. Okay, that is an original 1924 single room occupancy hotel. Used to be the Astor. Yes, there used to be a bar in there called the Astor Bar, just like the one in New York City, in Times Square. It's all gone. You can turn around now and look at us again. All right, Kim, you're going to tell us a story. Kim, I was hoping you could tell it in 2 parts, but, it's your story, not mine. Well, I was hoping you could sort of just down here talk about Bunny coming to the Astor, the Kawada, and then okay, just tell the story then. Okay, all right, that's okay. Okay, you're going to talk about, this is a story about Bunny Burns, and Bunny lives at the Northern. We're going to walk. Well, then maybe we should walk up the street.
No,
Okay. Great. Okay, go.
Because the Northern doesn't exist anymore. Bunker Hill is gone. But when people had to leave Bunker Hill, they had to go somewhere. And this is a story about someone who did not want to leave Bunker Hill, like Gordon. Now, Gordon, didn't have a chance to do what Bunny did. Bunny, I like to think of her as the human limpet. Have you ever been down to the tide pools and there are these little creatures that cling to the rocks, and they're not clinging that hard, but if you touch them, they cling really, really hard? That's Bunny. So it's April 26, 1969, and the Community Redevelopment Agency has a really big problem because they have emptied out the Northern Hotel. Everyone is gone. They have said that the hotel is not fit for people to live in. And up on the 8th floor, in room 825, with a beautiful view of the music center, Miss Bunny Burns, of indeterminate age, maybe 40, maybe 50, maybe 60, maybe 120, we really don't know, is in her room, and she will not leave, and she will not open the door. And whenever anyone knocks on the door, and this is many people from the CIA, social workers, eventually it escalates to deputy sheriffs and very high-ranking members of the sheriff's department, she always says the same thing. I'm talking to God. It's not time. I'll let you know when it's time. And she stays in her room, which she calls her garden. And it's important to remember that Bunny Burns has lived in the Northern Hotel since 1952. It's 1969 now. She has not physically left the Northern Hotel in 5 years because God told her that she had to stay put. And during those 5 years, she has practiced her ministry of the night, which is inspired by her many times spent at Sister Amy McPherson's temple on Echo Park in the 1920s and 30s, into the 40s, and in more recent years, listened to Oral Roberts on the radio. And her ministry goes something like this. She sleeps all day long. At night, she walks the halls. She checks everyone's door to make sure it's locked for their safety, and she sniffs like a bunny, which is her name. And what she's sniffing for is smoke, because all of her friends who live in the Northern are old men of various stages of infirmity. There's a few women too, but it's a mostly male population, and they have a tendency to smoke in bed and drop their cigarettes and set their mattresses on fire and kill everybody. This happens in hotels. It never happens in the Northern because Bunny sniffs all night long. So once everyone's gone, there are no smoke alarms. She's a human smoke alarm. You're right. So once everyone's gone, there's a problem. They'd like to starve her out. In fact, the night watchman, the desk man, is told, don't take food to her. She's going to eventually have to go. But no, that's really not something that he wants to do because he's her friend and she's his friend.
Where does he works? He's the night watchman at the King Edward Hotel.
Okay, so that's Ovner Height.
Yeah.
He's now the night clerk at the King Edward. They've moved him out. He says she has prevented any number of fires, but that's not actually the person.
Oh.
He's gone on. He was not the
that's
night.
right. They kicked him out.
He was
too,
not
right.
the night clerk there. They gave him a job at the King Edward, but the actual night clerk is a man named Ralph Clark, and he brings food to Bunny for one very simple reason. Ralph had a roommate who sounds like drank himself to death about a year prior. And he said, a close friend, my roommate of many years, died about a year ago. He had convulsions, then he hemorrhaged some. Penny was nice to me. She's a wonderful person. I don't want her to get hungry up there. So against all orders, he would bring food and leave it outside her door. Now the way that she communicates with God is through her telephone. She has long conversations on the phone with God. God has told her how to decorate her room. She calls it her garden. Apparently there are live plants flowering and a little altar of her creation. The room is 8 by 10 feet. It's absolutely
It's really
immaculate.
small,
It's
yeah.
beautiful. But nobody from the official side has ever seen it. They've heard her friends talk about it. They know that she takes it very, very seriously. But not until God is ready is Bunny going to allow anyone into her garden. And her old friend Bert Wilson, who is 70-something years old, he is a blind man. He hasn't been blind for long. He developed diabetes that went untreated. And he adores her. So he's sort of her spokesperson down in the lobby of the hotel. And when the press comes, and I should say we know a lot of what we know about Bunny because Robert Kistler of the LA Times, who later reported on the Manson family murders and did a lot of really good work for the Times. This is one of his major stories of that era, and he spent a lot of time in the hotel just listening. Wrote a beautiful piece.
He would meet Bert at the cafe across the street here.
He would meet Bert at the cafe across the street. Okay. So Bert says, listen, I want you to know why Bunny's so important to me. It's 1969, he's telling the story. 4th of July, 1960. Bert is not blind yet, he's not diabetic yet, but he's a heavy drinking man. Bert is laying out in his bed and he's in a lot of pain. And Bunny comes to him. And Bunny says, I'm going to drive that devil out of you, Bert, if you want him to go. And Bert says, get that devil out of me, Bunny, I'm ready. And she lays her hands, that devil motorcycle, she lays her hands upon him, and she says, Satan, in the name of Jesus, leave up out of the suffering body. and so forth and so on. It takes a while, of course. And damned if all of his pain doesn't go away. And she says, fantastic, I'll be on my way then. And as she gets to the door, he says, Bunny, come back, the pain is back. I think he kind of likes to lay it on with the hands. So he came back, she came back, and together they drove the devil out. And he admitted it might have been gas, he didn't know. But all that mattered is she made him feel better. And he was there for her. So that brings us up to June 3rd, 1969. They got to get her out of here. They got to tear the building down. They want to build high-rises that are going to take another 30 years to build. So they go and get Bert. They pick him up in their car because he's staying like in the new Roster Hotel apartments now. He doesn't even live anywhere nearby. They bring him. They have a bunch of sheriff's deputies. They have social workers. A very high-ranking member of the CRA is there. And they go to the door and they knock. And she says, Bert can come in. And Bert walks in. And the door is just a little bit ajar. They can see the garden inside. It is beautiful. It's a beautiful little room. And the two of them just start chattering at each other nonstop. They can't really tell what's being said. And then Miss Bunny sort of straightens her shoulders and she stands up and she says, I'm ready. I'll leave my garden now. And as she walks out the door, someone says to Bert, what were you talking about? And he said, we weren't talking. That was God talking through us. And God said it was time. So they put her in a car. It wasn't far, but remember, she hadn't been out of the building in 5 years. It was pretty heavy for her. And as they brought her over here, she moved into a third floor room. They were telling her, you're going to like it. It's so much nicer. It's newer. And here's what she said when she walked into her room. She said, oh, it's so lonely and bare. But I'll have it decorated with all my pretty flowers and other living things. And it'll be like a garden again. The problem was all her friends were gone. And I tried to find out when she died. The weirdest thing is Bunny doesn't exist in any official records.
The CRA can't find her.
No one can find her. I don't know if Bunny ever died.
They couldn't get her aid.
Bunny may still be in that building, or she may still be floating around. But the thing is,
her social worker couldn't get her on Social Security because they couldn't get a Social Security number.
She's an invisible person. But I'm absolutely convinced that every single person who was moved out of the Northern because they didn't move the community lived a shorter life because of it. Because you had a whole group of people like Coral Reef. They all took care of each other, made sure they were fed, made sure it's a train. Made sure that their spiritual needs were met, and just looked after one another. So that was the end of that. But this is where Bunny ended up, and I like that there were flowers on the fire escape, because you look at them and you'll think of Bunny.
Thank you. Wait, what? I'm sorry?
What number did she dial?
I don't know what number she dialed.
Was it long distance?
Gordon, I think you have something to say. Oh, before you start this, we are going to go just up the hill to Clay Street, so maybe you can just get us started and then up there.
I was just going to say, I didn't know Bunny, but I know the type. My family owned the castle. We spoke walking down here to somebody, a Victorian building called the Castle that was built in the 1880s. And long before we owned it, my grandmother bought it in 1937. It had been turned into a rooming house, so all the rooms were single family, or single occupancy. And Bunker Hill, after the war, largely became a retirement community. People moved, you heard the songs about San Fernando Valley and the subdivisions. The families moved off the hill if they could afford it and bought houses in suburbia. And what was left was the old people. And that's who our tenants were. They were elderly people that were called pensioners. But I don't think they had pensions. They had a little bit of Social Security. And those people all had largely disappeared when the hill was redeveloped.
Gordon, what happens to you when you're displaced?
What happens to you? You don't live as long, and you have to find someplace else, and you just get lost. You lose your community, you lose the people you knew, and when you are that age and you don't have much, it's hard to reestablish yourself someplace else.
Thank you. So we're gonna keep moving. Gordon, I want you to lead the way. We're gonna walk up the hill slowly in a couple stops. Yeah. I wanna walk up to Olive right there. So we're gonna cross the street. We're gonna walk up to Olive, and then eventually we're gonna get up to Grand. So let's follow Gordon. Wonderful rendition about Bunny's life. I love Bunny.
Yeah, does everyone see where the parking kiosk is? That's Clay Street.
Right there?
Yeah. Right there.
It ended at second. It ended at
right
second.
there.
And how far south did it go?
The fourth.
Hold on, let me get the Well, I think actually.
So what I'd like to do, I know that some people are wondering, but if some people want, people can stay here for a minute. But let's walk down to where Clay Street ended. There's a little gate.
No. It's freaking hot. We're in the shade.
Okay.
Good point.
Okay.
You can see it.
There's a parking kiosk right there, right where the balcony extends. That's the end of Clay Street. So this would have been. So the Northern Hotel would have sat here and gone down to where the parking kiosk was. And the Northern Hotel is where Bunny lived. Okay? Across the street was the Argyle. There are a series of apartments and hotels that went all the way down to Hill Street. The opening scene of the Charleston Heston film, Crisscross, 1949, is actually this block. It opens up, he gets out of prison and he comes back to his parents' house, and his parents live in an apartment block just south of the Argyle. And it's a great shot, and you've got the streetcar and everything. So this is where the Northern was. Kim, did you have the Northern stories?
Yeah.
Okay, and I'll make sure, and let me get you some water. Okay, so hold on, let me get you some water and you're gonna get your Northern stories.
Here you go, Kim. Want me to take your backpack?
You can hold my backpack.
Okay, great.
Okay, so now we're at the location of the Northern where Bunny Burns lived. And Kim, you, I'll do it, Kim.
You will?
I got it, don't
You
worry.
always walk in and cause
No, I'm
trouble.
not going to walk in and cause trouble. I'm going to make sure the camera doesn't auto zoom. So come on here. I got it, Alfie, don't worry. Okay, tell us about the Northern.
All right, Richard wants me to share a story from our old blog on Bunker Hill. We blogged a whole lot of stories from this lost neighborhood, and I do it all over again because it wasn't very long into doing that this guy came into our life and said, "You want to know about old Bunker Hill? You're looking at him." And it's been a lot of fun ever since. So this is one of the tales that I found. I was looking at the Northern. And the nice thing about these hotels, I get called all the time by people who want to, producers, they want to talk about Alyssa Lamb and the Cecil Hotel and this poor Canadian tourist who was found in the rooftop water tank a few years ago down on Main Street. And they're like, "Do you think that hotel has a curse? Is it haunted? Is there some demon that brings the serial killers and makes these awful things happen?" And I say, it's a hotel. It has 700 rooms. It's been open since the 1920s. You think it's weird that weird things have happened in a place where millions and millions of nights have been spent by tens and 20s and 30s of thousands of people every year? I don't. So you look at a place like the Northern, you're going to find some stories, and here's one of them. It's July of 1920, and there's two cute little gals from Little Rock, Miss Laura Cash and Miss Margaret Martin. They came to Los Angeles to have some fun, and they stumbled into a nightmare. I don't know why they were staying at the Northern, but I'm going to say they regretted it. So here's what happened. They just got into town, and then this strange, ticked-off lady shows up, and she opens the door to their room. See, they didn't have Bunny walking around making sure the rooms were locked. This woman opens the door and she throws a note crumbled up, a really dirty, nasty-looking note. And here's what it says: "Margaret Martin, it will not pay you to keep on with Levy. A word to the wise is sufficient. Signed, Mrs. Levy." And that's a warning, right? And Margaret Martin looks at this note and says, "Who the hell's Levy?" And a little bit of time goes by. Now, so Miss Martin goes out to take a walk by herself, and she leaves her friend Miss Cash alone in the room. And as it happens, Mrs. Levy is actually named Matilda, and she comes back and she opens up the door again. They still haven't learned to lock the door, even though people are throwing strange notes in. And she barges right in, and she looks at Miss Cash, and she assumes it's Miss Martin, the woman that she's obsessed with, and she is obsessed. And she says, "You've been messing with my husband." And Miss Cash says, "Who's your husband?" And she says, "Shut up." And she takes out a cowhide whip and she slashes her across the face 5 or 6 times while this poor young girl is screaming and trying to get away. And then she leaves. So, now as it turns out, here's what happened. Matilda Levy is a very, very jealous woman. She's actually estranged from her husband. He's a lawyer. He has a partner. Apparently, they're both men about town, so she regularly goes into their law office and just kind of cases the joint. And she found a business card for Miss Martin, a visiting card for Miss Martin on the desk. It turns out the reason for that was that Miss Martin was a friend of the business partner. That didn't much matter to her. So, just you check into a hotel, and the next thing you know, an extremely angry, jealous woman is scarring you for life with a cowhide whip. So that's all that this story kind of has to do with the Northern, because things go on. But I should let you know, Matilda Levy will go on to have a very, very ugly divorce. She's been whipping women kind of nonstop. She whipped Miss Emma K. Doyle of Chicago down at the Hotel Clark on Hill Street in December of 1918. She whipped Mrs. Inez Farnham, a cabaret singer from the Philippines, in a hotel dining room, and also chased her down Broadway while her estranged husband yelled, "Would you leave her alone? I don't even know that woman." So they brought her in front of the Lunacy Commission. The third time's the charm. She keeps whipping women. And here's what the Lunacy Commission had to say about Matilda. She is not absolutely normal, but not insane. And I think that probably applies to most people on this tour. I don't know. Not absolutely normal, but not insane. But Mr. Levy, Frederick, he definitely knew that this was not a safe woman to hang around. So he skipped town. And he did it in such a way that he hoped that she wouldn't follow him. Did it as a road trip. He abandoned his car in Texas, continued on to New Orleans. She found him there. And it was there in New Orleans on a busy street in front of hundreds of witnesses that she confronted him. And she did not whip him. She took out her gun and she shot him in the back and killed him. And the last thing we know of her, after spending a year in the mental hospital, because remember, she's not insane, she's just not quite normal. They let her out after a year, and she was running all around Southern California trying to claim his property. Which, as far as we know, she did, because she was his legal wife. It's a happy story. It's a love story.
A love story.
Lock your door.
Drink your water.
Thank you, Kim. That was just fantastic. Yeah, it was heartening. It really was. So I hope we're giving you a glimpse of just some of the life here. Gordon, we're on Olive Street. We're going to go up to Grand, and you're going to read that John Fante article about the demolition of Bunker Hill. Do you want to just talk about Olive Street, which is this... Olive is this weird street now. Before redevelopment, Olive was just a normal street, and we'll see it better when we get up the hill to Grand, but Grand and Olive... So in 1960, the city of Los Angeles decided it would be a really good idea if they started segregating pedestrian traffic and vehicular traffic and public and what we now call light rail, even though they took away all the red cars. So they made Olive Street have two levels, one for service vehicles and one... It's just weird. It's just, the Bunker Hill is really weird, and this is all because they thought they wanted to separate, like all the delivery trucks would go on this service road, and the pedestrians would stay on Grand, and the cars would drive on Olive Street. So that's why Bunker Hill is so weird, is they have these very weird notions about urban redevelopment.
I'll just point out a couple of things. Where that parking lot is, if you look, it has two entrances, one here and one over there. There was a U-shaped street called Olive Court that sat right there with buildings around the U and in the middle of the U. It's called Olive Court. Over here is what was, when it was built in the 1960s, was called a temporary parking structure. It's been there ever since then. It doesn't look too temporary to me. On this corner over here was the Mission Apartments, and it was built in Mission Revival style. Just up the street was the Chesapeake. That you'll see these things in old noir movies that were shot up here and on Bunker Hill. And when we get up to the corner, I'll talk about the things that are up there. But one thing that I would point out is that if you look down the street down there, you'll see what looks like a bridge across the street. That's how high it used to be up here. So they took that much off. This did slope down here a bit, but Olive was up at that level originally. That's how high Angel's Flight was, the terminus of it.
This old Bunker Hill, this is unrecognizable to us now. So I think we mentioned when you were looking up Hill Street, the Music Center, like not the top of the Music Center, but maybe halfway up the Music Center is how high Hill Street was. I mean, Second Street was. Second Street just went up. It went all the way up a lot higher. So Gordon, why don't we go to the top of the hill, and you're going to talk about John Fante and harp. Okay, and I'll let you lead the way, and it looks like there's some nice shade there, so I think we're in good shape. All right, Gordon, we are at 2nd and Grand. Tell us everything.
All right, 2nd and Grand. So, on this corner right here, where the temporary parking structure is located now, there was actually an Art Deco building that was built in the 1930s. So people were still optimistic about Bunker Hill even in the Depression. There was an Art Deco building that was built there. It was really a nice, lovely, art modern kind of building. Next to that was a hotel called the Carlisle, and attached to it was the Melrose. These were originally single-family mansions that pretty early on got turned into hotels. And there are pictures of people in the 1880s who come out here to California for the sun on the train. You know, when the train finally got to Southern California, you could get here from the east. They came out here to enjoy the climate. And you can see pictures of those tourists standing on the front steps of the Melrose Hotel. Beautiful, beautiful building that existed until 1956, and I remember the day they tore that place down. It was a beautiful place. President McKinley went to a banquet there. Right here on this corner was our local gas station. Yep. We passed the building called the where the Chesapeake was built, between here and the Mission Apartments, again seen in many noir films. Over there is the Broad, and on that corner there was a building called the Dome, which is a big apartment house. Called the Minnewaska, also as the other name, is called the Dome because it had these onion-shaped domes in the top of it. The owner of that resisted redevelopment for a really long time, and it was still up here in the mid-60s.
Well, it had that famous fire.
It had a famous fire, yeah. They said it was a fire trap, and that's why it should be torn down, and the LA Times was behind that and everything else. And guess what? There was a fire. Mysterious origin. But that was a great place. I'm going to take you down the street a little bit. We're going to pass on the right the location of a building called the Frontenac that was a lot like the Northern Hotel. It was a brick hotel, like the Kawada, probably the same era. And we get to the 3rd and Grand, and I got a lot of places to tell you about it, 3rd and Grand.
Why don't you read?
Want me to read this here?
Yeah.
Okay.
So do you want me to explain what this is, or do you?
I can do it.
Okay. Yeah.
This is written by John Fante. Do people know who John Fante was?
I think you have to explain to them who he is.
John Fante was a writer that moved to Los Angeles from Denver. His parents were Italian immigrants, and he moved here from Denver when he was about 21 years old in 1932, about then. And he settled up here on Bunker Hill. And he lived in a place called the Alta Vista, which was an apartment house that was on the corner of 3rd and South Bunker Hill Avenue. Our buildings were on South Bunker Hill Avenue, a block south of the Alta Vista. He was a struggling writer, and when I read this, you'll understand something about that. He went on to write screenplays in Hollywood, and was successful as a screenplay writer in Hollywood. I don't think he ever liked being a screenplay writer for Hollywood, but
that's a polite word.
Yeah,
that's a polite word.
But it paid the bills. And this is a piece that appeared in the Los Angeles Times that he wrote in 1950. Now, I should preface this by saying that they had talked about tearing down Bunker Hill since the 1920s. The Depression got in the way of that. World War II got in the way of that, and then it started happening after World War II. So this is written in 1950. And this is John Fante. I used to live on Bunker Hill. It was my first home in this incredible city. That was in 1932, a time of dreams for me and of poverty. I had a typewriter and a stack of white paper and I had my room in a hotel on Bunker Hill. It cost me $3 a week, that little room. A fabulous sum in those lean days, but I wish I might do it over again. Sit in my little room with its worn green carpet, sit there in the high, old-fashioned rocker, eating my orange, my feet on the window, feasting my eyes on the city below. Such dreams for a man. A whole afternoon with the sun pouring down, a whole evening under white, chunky stars. This is the place, I used to gasp. I shall never leave here. I never did much work in those days, never finished more than a short story. It held me, that famous, mysterious little room with its startling view, that lonely Bunker Hill with its ancient buildings, its quiet streets and lonely trees, with here and there a bright spot from which came the scent of singeing hamburgers, the crooning voice of Bing Crosby, the soft sound of men speaking and laughing. Where do I hear that? I remember the cool afternoons, the city below, a film of carbon monoxide choking it, the deep moaning of traffic within the 3rd Street tunnel, the high frightened squeal of the cable car lurching up Angel's Flight. I was higher than the City Hall, higher than the Biltmore, higher than the Richfield Tower. It was paradise. I couldn't work. I was drugged in dreams, steeped in the fascination of old houses and gentle eucalyptus trees growing out of the green slopes there on the west side of Bunker Hill. Sometimes I went down to the library and got a book, some poetry maybe, some gentle and persuasive book, something to read on the hillside, something to put me to sleep under the eucalyptus trees. Fruit, he talked. I edited this. He talked about going down to 3rd and Flower, where he got oranges from a Japanese grocer down there. Fruit, fruit, fruit. Apples for breakfast, oranges for lunch, bananas for dinner. I used to sit with my feet on the window, watching the city lights bursting in the green twilight, my lap piled with banana skins and orange peels. But I liked it, waiting for the darkness, waiting for the night, and a prowl through the dismal effluence of Main Street, the lower 5th Street, down the eternal stairs of Angel's Flight to Hill Street, and the blazing inferno below, down to the plaza, down to Chinatown and Alvera Street, down to the jangled bitterness of lower 5th Street, drinking it down, gulping it down, the wild, beautiful, terrible city. Then midnight, a slow pull up the steep stairs of Angel's Flight. He wanted to save the nickel.
Yeah.
Counting the stairs just for the fun of it, always getting mixed up after 100. Happy to reach my hotel, grateful for the hard bed in my little room, its sheets so worn and thin you could see the striped mattress beneath. And there to lie and watch the neon lights jumping red and blue across the foot of the bed, my head whirling with a jumble of panting sensations. Gala days, old Bunker Hill, I loved you then. Strange people in that hotel, strangers from Ohio, from New York, from Indiana, suspicious folk, lonely folk hating their suspicion, eager to quench their loneliness, but afraid of what? They didn't know. They had just been warned. Los Angeles is bad. Be very careful of strangers. I used to sit on the porch and watch them in the evenings as they returned from the roaring city below. Their eyes were startled, their mouths open, their breaths coming hard after a steep climb. Gratefully, they threw themselves onto the porch rockers and gazed in confusion at the mysterious sky. The quiet hill relaxed them. The swishing palms told them they had returned to their earth again, back from the crazy world below. Their limbs sang with gratitude for Bunker Hill. The softness of children filled their hurried eyes. But they are all gone now. These people scattered like dust. Everything changes, and for better or worse, the change came for me. And the years have trickled away, and Bunker Hill is only a memory. But it lives on. It gave my thought food and drink. It sated my hunger for life, despite the harsh rigors of a straight fruit diet during the heroic months. Everything changes, and now Bunker Hill faces changes. It seemed timeless, and now they are putting it away. The papers carry the story. The old Bunker Hill must go. The old hotels, the brave palms, the quiet streets, away with them all. They are going to tear down Bunker Hill or build it up or wipe it out or something. It hurts me. I set my lips and inhale my cigarettes and smile. Those precious months, those tender nights, how shall I mark them? Where shall I go to find their souvenirs? They are changing Bunker Hill, yes, but in my heart, the palms sigh, the little plots of grass on the slopes remain forever green, and the boy's kite is helplessly entangled in the branches of a brave eucalyptus tree.
Thank you, Gordon. Thank you, Gordon. That was beautiful. That was, I know, Gordon. Everyone knows that's your Bunker Hill. We all know that. Don't worry. We all know that. Gordon, I wanted to know, you know, Ansel Adams has that famous photograph of the old men sitting at the end of 2nd Street. Do you want to talk about this lost topography now that we're at the top of 2nd Street looking out over? Didn't it just end? Yeah.
Yeah, they're looking this way down.
Oh, okay. Do you want to talk about that for a minute? How these streets just sort of ended and looked over other streets?
Yeah. There were a number of dead-end streets, and that was one of them. It was actually went down to where Court Flight was by City Hall, and there were lots of what you'd call nooks and crannies, places where they were out of the way of busy traffic. They weren't thoroughfares, and people could go and sit quietly and contemplate. As I mentioned, there was a large retirement population up here, a large community of elderly people who had lots of time on their hands and were able to go and sit quietly, talk, contemplate, read, because they all went down to the library. They all had library cards. And it was a real quiet community. It wasn't the crime-ridden slum that people said it was. It was a real oasis. I called it an oasis, a quiet oasis above the busy street, the busy city down below, where you could hear sirens and traffic and all that. It was just quiet up there, very pleasant.
I think we should round the corner and go south and get over to 3rd, maybe? Okay, you know where you're taking us because you're going to wrap this up. So you just make this left and take us wherever you need to. Okay, I'm following you.
Respect, you know? With respect, exactly. They disrespected. They didn't just disrespect it. They had no thought of it.
They violated it.
It never even occurred to them that it was
You want to
worth
start with talking about where Bunker Hill Avenue actually
Yeah,
is?
we'll do that.
Carl, let me throw this right here.
Okay, so Gordon, we're third. Okay, so let me just quickly. I mentioned when we were down on Olive Street that when they rebuilt. By the way, Gordon, help me. Grand Avenue, the old Grand Avenue, was officially closed to traffic in February of 1970, and in November of 1974, this Grand Avenue reopened. So for 4 years, from 1970 to 74, the city, well, they tore down everything. They demolished the whole neighborhood, and then they took off about 30 feet of dirt from where we are, and then they built Grand Avenue as sort of this curtain. It's a platform over Olive Street. Remember I was saying Olive Street and Grand earlier? Olive is a street, and this is actually just steel. Like there's nothing under this except concrete, like a foot of concrete and reinforced steel.
But Richard, there is another street.
There's and then there's the Surface Street General Castell. I can never pronounce the name. Yeah, there's the Surface Street because they wanted to segregate. Like commercial traffic, pedestrian traffic, and service traffic. And you can see there are these light wells. So I see these railings. These are these light wells that extend down to that service road for the general, whose name I can never pronounce, and then Olive Street.
If you've ever gone to Disney Hall and you came off the Harbor Freeway on 4th Street and you parked it, you make a left turn and it says parking for Disney Hall, you're driving down the street that's underneath here.
Right.
Down to
It's very complicated, and the city just had these, in my opinion, truly psychotic notions of how you should segregate all of this traffic. So Grand Avenue was closed for 4 years, and they reopened it, and it was this totally new street that was much lower. And now I think the Grand Avenue project is in its 10th year, and they've just asked the city for a giant tax break. They've asked, anyway, Grand Avenue project's a nightmare. Gordon, tell us about the good old days.
This is the intersection of Grand and 3rd Street. Now that's 3rd Street. 3rd Street used to go through here, straight over there where the Omni Hotel is, to the other side of Olive. That's where Angel's Flight was. So there was a street right through here. Where Mocha was an apartment house. The name is escaping me. It'll come to me. Over here on this corner was the Angel's Flight Pharmacy. And next to that was a little grocery store called the Budget Basket, and then a shoe repair, and then a cleaners, and then a bar, and then a cafe. So we walked from South Bunker Hill Avenue. That doesn't exist anymore, but between that street down there where the signal is, that's Olive. And Grand...
Oh, that's Hope.
I'm sorry, that's Hope. Between Hope and here was a street called South Bunker Hill Avenue that ran north and south from 4th Street all the way up. Well, there still is a North Bunker Hill Avenue that goes up through Chinatown.
Right, you can walk on North Bunker Hill Avenue still.
And that's where we lived. We lived in the 300 block, which was between 3rd and 4th Street, and the building called the Castle. Those of you who know John Fante, the room he was talking about was in the Alta Vista, which was on the corner of South Bunker Hill Avenue and 3rd Street, right over there, except that it was up there. Because Hill Street, you see, goes, 3rd Street goes down to Hope. It used to go up to South Bunker Hill Avenue where it dead ended. The 3rd Street tunnel comes out over there. My father actually used to sell newspapers at the upper terminus of Angel's Flight. And I am fairly certain that he was, I know he was living here at the same time John Fante was, and I'm pretty certain they probably passed each other on the street. Because he lived right here. On that corner was a building, an old building. It was 301 South Bunker Hill Avenue. My grandmother leased that building, and 303, which was next door, and 311, which was down there, and turned them into rooming houses. And when they first came to Bunker Hill, they lived at 311 over there. I have photographs of that and photographs in it. This is ground zero of Bunker Hill. On that corner was a building called the New Grand Hotel. And there was a delicatessen right on that corner, right there. And when we came up from downtown, from Angel's Flight, and walked back this way, I used to like to go in there and get a Pepsi Cola out of the cooler because it was really good and it cost about a dime. In the movie Cry Danger with Dick Powell, which is shot up over there on the other side of what's now the Hollywood Freeway, but also up here on Bunker Hill, he drives his Nash up Grand Avenue and he makes the turn and he parks right there. Oh, but remember, you have to go up a little ways. Right there, and he walked in there. And he walked right past the cooler with the bottles inside. I saw that movie a couple of years ago, and oh my goodness. That was my cooler.
Thank you, Gordon. Thank you. I think we're ready to sort of wrap it up and just walk over to the station house. I see the station house. Think you can get us there?
Yeah.
I think you can get us there too. All right, we're going to walk over to the Angels Light Station House. We'll be about 150 feet above Grand Central Market, and I think we'll wrap it. We'll be in good position to wrap it up at that point. All right, Gordon, lead the way.
I'm down here, I'm down at night when all these light bulbs are lit up. It's real magic. It's really cool. That's the kind of lighting we had on Bunker Hill. When those buildings were built, many of them before they were electrified, so there were gas lights in a lot of them. I don't know why the places didn't burn down, but they didn't. But there were a lot of light bulbs like that in the buildings on Bunker Hill. I remember that.
So, Gordon, I think this is a really good place to wrap it up. We're right over Grand Central Market.
Yeah.
We're in the shadow of California Plaza 1 and 2. We're at the temporarily disabled Angels Flight. Can I give an Angels Flight update?
Go ahead.
Okay, so as Gordon and I are vice presidents, and so is Kim, of the Angels Flight Friends and Neighbors Society, we call ourselves fans.
There's no president.
There's no president of fans. So can I see the phone?
Yeah.
I'm just going to quote the CEO of the Angels Flight Railway Foundation.
Okay.
So Hal Bastian is the CEO of the Angels Flight Railway Foundation, and I emailed him, as I do every week before the next salon, and I say, "Hey Hal, let's see." So let's see. On July 28th, I sent Hal Bastian, CEO of Angels Flight Railway Foundation, an email, subject line, Angels Flight Update. And I said, Hal, our salon is next week at Grand Central and another walking tour. People will be asking about Angels Flight because we're going up to the station house. I thought I'd check in, and his response is, "Dear Richard, please tell everyone on the tour that we are making slow but steady progress and to keep the faith."
Big but
Yes, we're
encouraging.
making progress.
That's what he said. So,
In other words, get out of my face.
So what?
I don't think he said that, Carl, but I didn't. I'm not his attorney. So, we're hopeful that Hal Bastian and John Welborn are continuing to make progress on reopening Angels Flight, and we'll keep everyone posted. We're very concerned. I think it's safe to say at this point people are definitely in the cars. I don't think anyone's living in the car permanently, but people are definitely getting into the cars, and it's a real problem. We're very concerned. Kim, have I forgotten anything about Angels Flight? They're walking on the tracks. It's an attractive nuisance. It's a real problem. John and Hal.
3D.
We have a 3D scan of Angels Flight. We put it up about 8 weeks ago. If you go to the Esotouric blog, we got our friend Craig, we got John Welborn to pull it up. Jordan, you were here. We got to pull it up on the track, and he went in the car and scanned it. And it looks like you're riding, well, he did ride the car, so it's a lot of fun. Gordon, this is built in 1901. Colonel Eddy. We're actually in touch with the great-great-grandson of Colonel Eddy, Chris, who is a big fan and very concerned, and wrote the Angels Flight web app, mobile app. So yeah, it's very exciting. Gordon, you want to talk about riding the car?
I already did.
Oh, you did talk about riding the car. I'm sorry. I was putting things away. Okay. Well, let me wrap this up. California Plaza 2, California Plaza 1, these came in the 80s. This was, there was supposed to be a third California Plaza right here on the grassy knoll. I guess one day that will materialize. But the hope was that when California Plaza 3 came in, Angels Flight would be attached to it somehow. That the people that had the lease on California Plaza 3 would have an intrinsic interest, economic and emotional, in making sure Angels Flight ran. And I don't know, maybe they'll build it one day. But Angels Flight we have to figure out how to get Angels Flight working before California Plaza 3 goes up. Angeles Plaza. When Angeles Plaza, I think in 1980, I think at the time it was the largest retirement home ever built. And when the CRA, so all this land on Bunker Hill is mostly privately owned now, but there are early in the redevelopment process, in the late 1960s, when they started leasing plots, they would lease plots. And you can actually, if you go into Zemus is it's Zemus, Z-I-M-A-S, zemus.lacity.org. It's not through Building and Safety, I don't think. I forget who runs Zemus. It's in conjunction with the county, because it walks down the city by assessor parcels, by the county assessor parcels. And if you look at the first 4 digits of the county assessor parcel, you can tell if it's public or private land. And if you just look at the parcels on Bunker Hill, there's an interesting checkerboard of public and private land, because the CRA changed the way it went from leasing to selling parcels in the redevelopment process. It's a good thought process for people. Go look at that. So when Angeles Plaza was negotiating to come in here, the CRA said to them, oh, wouldn't it be neat, because they took down Angel's Flight in 1970, the beginning of 1970, and the CRA kept saying, we're going to bring it back, we're going to bring it back. And so when they found a tenant for the parcel that Angel's Flight sat on, they said, oh, wouldn't it be neat if the funicular went back there? And the retired seniors home said, no, that would be like that would be a deal breaker. Like, we wouldn't come to the next meeting if you come to the table with bringing Angel's Flight back in the middle of our retirement home.
And they have to make affordable housing for seniors. Well,
Right. So the irony of the Bunker Hill redevelopment was that the city and the CRA said, we're going to destroy this neighborhood, but don't worry, we're gonna bring affordable senior housing immediately to this neighborhood.
Immediately, like years.
Right within 2 years. Right. Everyone that's gone is going to be back here in 2 years, and that didn't happen. Angeles Plaza was about 20 years after the redevelopment project started. So it was just very disappointing, and they refused to let Angel's Flight be installed in the middle of their retirement home, which spans the 3rd Street Tunnel. So the CRA had to build this platform, and this is a really good way to end the tour, to think about how high old Bunker Hill was, because this platform, which rises well above California Plaza, had to be built because they didn't want to truncate the track. You know, they didn't know what impact. They thought that would be too complicated to figure out if it was safe to run the track.
It'd be a pretty short ride, too.
It'd be a lot, right. So this platform was built to match the original grade and the original length of the track, and it opened in '96, and it was only with a lot of effort on the part of John Welborn pushing. What's Dennis Luna, right? So in 1994. In 1994, you know, is it the Northridge? 1994 is the Northridge earthquake. City Hall is closed, right? Everything above the 4th floor in City Hall is closed. The Red Line construction in Hollywood, they're considering abandoning. And things in Los Angeles are kind of tough. People are like, And Dennis Luna is the finance secretary for the Community Redevelopment Agency of Los Angeles. And since he knows where all the money is, he keeps saying, well, things might be looking grim, but the CRA has lots of money, so why aren't we fixing Angel's Flight? And so, because he actually knew that they had lots of money, he decided that he was going to become the president, the founding board member of the Angel's Flight Railway Foundation. And the CRA, which had pledged almost 20 years earlier to reinstall Angel's Flight, he got on their case, and they brought Angel's Flight back by '96. So I think that's a good way to end the tour. Yeah, Dennis Luna, who quit the board about 2 years ago, the Angel's Flight board, and no one's seen him since. On lots of committees.
With Bunny.
He's not with Bunny. He's on commissions. He's a very busy man. I'm sure he's a very busy man. So that's it. I'm going to turn off the microphone and thank everyone. Gordon, thank you. Good job. So we'll do this again. Oh, I'll put the mic. So we'll do this again next month. Next month, Nathan will be back, and we're going to do Lost Tunnels of Hill Street and Broadway. I know I stopped you from talking about the Hill Street Tunnel, but it's good. It was a teaser to come back. So next month when we come back, we'll talk about the Broadway Tunnel, which is 1901. We'll talk about the Hill Street Tunnel, which is 1910, and
Lizard people?
yeah, we'll talk about the lizard. Yes, of course, we'll talk about the lizard people. Yeah. Go.
if we want to learn more about what we discussed today, or see pictures
good
or
question.
video,
Yeah. Okay.
other
Yes.
than Google, where can
We
go?
have a blog. It's called onbunkerhill.org, and that's the URL, onbunkerhill.org. And if you just type in Gordon, Nathan, Kim, Bunker Hill, you'll get into Google. You'll get the first 300 returns lists, the results set of that. The first
Those are
300.
organized by street, so you
Yeah. It's organized by street. It's a great resource. I rebuilt the site. I think it's a little easier to use. And we're going to try and do some street overlays maybe next year. I have a lot going on this year, but next year we're going to try and get a historic overlay. So you can look at an old map of Bunker Hill, and we're going to put houses on the old map, and then you can zoom, and you'll get a street view of a current street. So on Bunker Hill, yeah. Any other questions? I want to thank everyone for coming. It's been a lot of. It's always fun to do this, Gordon, isn't it?
Hey, you got a question?
Absolutely.
Yeah, go.
This video gonna be on Facebook?
This video goes up on YouTube. So
They're a little
it
long
takes-
for Facebook, yeah.
I think it's a little long. What happens is there's a URL. It's if you go to the Lava website, lavatransforms.org, there's a menu item called Broadway, because this is ostensibly a Broadway walking tour because we started on Broadway. Because
Kind
Resident
of.
Market's on Broadway. Okay, Kim, it's okay. And if you click on the Broadway link, it's a landing page of all the tours we've done. And it's just thumbnails of all of them. And the most recent one is the first one. And so in 2 weeks, Kim will rip this and post it to YouTube, or maybe a week, whatever. It's not like, it's
Before the
not-
next one, it'll be up.
Right. It's not like someone's.
So it's,
So we'll post it. And I'll make an event. I'll make a video of it, and it'll get the same URL as this walking tour URL, and it'll be on the page.
What's the name of your YouTube channel?
Esotouric.
Yeah, it's the good question. It's not Lava. It's the Esotouric YouTube channel. Okay.
Like that.
Okay. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank everyone. Remember the Peabody House in Boyle Heights.
Keep on a what?
The Peabody House.
Oh, Peabody.